been 13 years and we're still going, and almost 2,000 operations later.
Wow.
Yeah, I would like to believe that we've actually made a small difference in a system that's quite tired and quite broken, but this has been a little light point. And breast surgery, I think it was already as a student. I very vividly remember my surgical rotation and seeing 2 breast cancer patients that made an enormous impression on me. Almost as a woman, being able to place myself in their shoes, where at that point everybody standing around their bed was male. Everybody treating them was male, and even as a student, having the ability to connect with them and to connect with their experience, and having this inkling that having a different connection with this patient throughout their treatment journey would make such a big difference. And I was just drawn to that. As I was specializing in surgery, I mean, it became clear as daylight that this is where I want to spend my energy. Also because it kind of lends itself to a little bit of a different type of surgical practice. Surgery can be very mechanical, you know. You take someone's appendix out and you never see them again, you know. It's like, take the gallbladder out, cheers, off you go. Hope you're better. You never see them again. But with these patients, you have at least a 5-year relationship. You see them continuously. You actually get to know them. So it is a completely different journey. You have the thrill and the joy of using your surgical skill to assist them.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Maria Christodoulou, and this is the Awakening Doctor podcast, a space where we discover the personal stories of those who work in the medical and health professions. Join me as I explore the hopes, the fears, the aspirations, and the real-life challenges of those who carry the title, responsibility, and privilege of being a doctor. My guest today is Dr. Liana Roodt. Liana is a breast, endocrine, and general surgeon working in private practice in the Western Cape here in South Africa. She's also a senior surgical consultant and lecturer at Groote Hospital and the University of Cape Town, and founder of Project Flamingo, which I'll let her tell you about in a moment. During her medical training, she was named one of the top 10 healthcare innovators of 2014 by the UCT Graduate School of Business's Bertha Institute, and she received 2 awards for her research work within the surgery department and was appointed chief resident. Also in the room with us is Amy Kay, writer and narrative coach, and the producer and editor of the Awakening Doctor podcast. Welcome, Liana. Thank you for joining us today.
So good to see you.
And you too. So you and I met in, I think it was 2010, when you started the certificate course in integrative medicine.
Yes. I will never forget the first phone call that I made to you, and I don't know if you actually remember it, but it was in the tea room at the old GF Jooste Hospital in Manenberg on the Cape Flats, where I've just started surgery, and I got your number from Simon, through which I did a mindfulness course.
Dr. Simon Weitzman.
Dr. Simon Weitzman. And he was, this is a woman that you need to connect with. And we had a very brief conversation, and you advised me to contact the faculty to enroll in the integrative medicine course, which I then promptly did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gosh, I remembered the conversation we had at the coffee shop in the gardens about your surgical residency and whether you were going to continue or not. That was the one that stayed with me.
Yes, I remember that vividly as well.
Oh. So maybe that's a good place to start. Surgical resident, breast endocrine general surgeon. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. It's been a completely non-linear journey. Even as a high school student, I was quite unsure as to what I want to do with my life. There was a lot of expectation. You know, there's certain careers that people sort of expect people with certain types of personalities or that excel at certain things, that's the direction that you're going to go. But I was always a very curious child. So my attention jumped from one thing to the other, but the sciences was always in there. And, you know, lo and behold, at the end of my matric year, I got accepted into medical school. And it seemed to everybody that that should be the logical course to follow. But in January of my first year, I actually made the decision not to do medicine and to instead enroll for a BCom degree.
So I read that you started with a BCom.
Yes, because I had this big panic. Am I actually doing what I want to do, or am I conforming to a giant expectation? And there was also a lot of other voices saying medicine's not really a great career for a girl are you sure you really want to do this? It's going to come with so many sacrifices. Most people are so unhappy. Actually, the people that were having these conversations with me, my boyfriend at the time's parents, for instance, made me meet with some of their friends that were in the medical field that were all very negative about the future of medicine, women in medicine in particularly. And I made this huge 180 turn to my parents' absolute shock and horror, and enrolled for BCom. And it was, I think, 3 months in when I realized I made a huge mistake. Not only, I've never had any business subjects at school. So, people were doing first year accounting and I was still trying to figure out what is debit and credit. and this whole business world it just felt so unfamiliar, and it just didn't sit right in my skin. Oh my word, I need to go back. That in itself was a whole journey to actually convince the School of Medicine that indeed this time I was serious and that I really do want to be accepted into this course again. And I was actually standing in the queue to register this following year, for my second year, into a BSc degree when I got the call that I actually got accepted again. And then started my medical training. And then I enrolled in medical school, and the surgical disciplines sort of grabbed my attention from the get-go. It was so strange how history kind of repeated itself. Like, I sort of had this knowing that this is what I wanted to do. And again, it was that whole rigmarole. It's a bad lifestyle choice. It's a bad choice for a woman. You're setting yourself up for difficulty, and yet the desire to actually specialize in surgery, it just didn't go away to where I finally did choose to pursue it. And maybe everybody wasn't so wrong, because it was fairly challenging, and that sort of brought me to the conversation where we were, where I was sure, am I actually going to push through with this, or am I going to concede and say, you know what, you guys were right, this was not a good idea.
Do you want to say more about why it wasn't a good idea?
In retrospect, obviously it was, but it is a road that is non-conventional in so many ways, especially in the time that I pursued it. I think it's much more common now for women to pursue surgical careers, thank goodness. I was in that first lot of females pursuing the more male-dominated medical specialities. And that came with a whole bunch of challenges that I think I underestimated. At least for a period of time, you really do have to work a lot harder to earn the same degree of respect and authority, I think, within the field. As a woman in a traditionally male-dominated career, be it medicine or whatever, I think that there is a lot of pressure, and sometimes maybe even coming from yourself, to work just that little bit harder to prove yourself. You have to stand just a little bit taller. You have to push a little harder constantly just to gain the respect and the authority that seems to come a lot easier for male colleagues.
Yeah. I've heard you say in the past that you think some of those challenges are discipline related and generational rather than gender related. Do you still think that's true?
If I look at the female registrars that's coming through now, and I just look at how the academic culture has shifted, I do think there's some truth in that. And I'm so grateful to see that has definitely shifted a lot. The new generation of doctors coming through, and this goes for both genders, have a completely different view on how they would like to balance career and life. They seem so much more comfortable to stand up for what they feel is important, not just for their career advancement, but actually for their quality of life, which was a completely foreign and unacceptable almost concept to do when I was training. It was ludicrous to think that you can have a view on that or a push towards it. You definitely were viewed as weak. Aren't you able to cope? Put on your big old panties, toughen up. Those are the mantras that we grew up with.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely, I think, because the gender balance in the discipline, the feminine energy that is now much more present, has opened it up to have different types of conversations and creating a different type of work environment, which is hopeful.
Absolutely. I also read somewhere that one of the things that was said to you quite early on in your career before you started surgery was, "My girl, you are welcome to try and do surgery. As long as you can work like a man, I see nothing wrong with it."
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was spot on. It wasn't like, can you do this as well as you can and bring what you can bring as a woman to the discipline? It was, you can do it as long as you can do it exactly how we, and the we in this context was predominantly white men, have been doing it.
You also spoke earlier about knowing that this was what you had to do, and then kind of all these voices that come at you about whether it's the right thing to do, and often those voices are gender sort of related. As a woman, this is not the right career. I had those too, and I remember senior professors saying things like, "You've taken up a place that a man should have filled, and you're not going to work full time. You're wasting the government's money," all that sort of stuff.
That comes up a lot.
Absolutely. But you've said before that you believe in callings, and the exact statement that I read was, not big dramatic Hollywood callings, but a certain path that makes you feel just comfortable in your own skin and at home in the world. Do you feel like surgery was a calling for you?
Absolutely. I think that's why I'm still here. It's that quiet place that visits you every now and again, when you can let all the outside noise drop away and you're actually present in what you are doing. And you return to the core of why you're there, which is that interaction with the patient. That very beautiful and sacred exchange between a healer and a patient, and it's the exchange that happens because it's not a one-directional thing at all. And you tap into that presence, and for that moment where I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm so grateful that I've had countless of those moments.
I'm curious about why breast surgery, why endocrine surgery. Tell us a little bit about Project Flamingo.
I actually started Project Flamingo in the same year that I met you. As I was working in the surgical department, part of my duties were to see the patients in the surgical clinic, which often included women with breast lumps that were then subsequently diagnosed with breast cancer. And because I was at a smaller district level hospital, these women had to be referred on to Groote Hospital, the academic tertiary institution. And I would often make a follow-up appointment with them just to check in afterwards, how did their appointment go, how's their treatment going. And I would often see them 3 months down the line from the initial referral and realize that most of them have not received any treatment yet. I was really confused about the whole situation, and I saw and felt what a massive impact this had on not just the woman, but their whole community, their families, the whole ecosystem that depended on them. And I made a call to Groote just to try and figure out what's going on, and was told that just because of the massive patient loads and the constant restriction on resources, theatre time being one of them, there simply was just not enough time to operate on all these women. So the surgical waiting time was just increasing and increasing daily. And that just seemed like a completely unacceptable situation to me. And people can go and read about it on our website. But essentially what I came up with the help of my friends and also the support of a wonderful female surgeon that was at Groote at that point, was to create what we call surgical catch-up lists. So opening theatres that would usually stand empty over a weekend, raise funds to pay for the consumables and the nursing staff to work and staff those theatres and change it into a workable space, and get volunteer surgeons and anaesthetists to then come and try and clear this massive backlog of cancer operations that needed to happen. It's been 13 years and we're still going, and almost 2,000 operations later.
Wow.
Yeah, I would like to believe that we've actually made a small difference in a system that's quite tired and quite broken, but this has been a little light point. And breast surgery, I think it was already as a student. I very vividly remember my surgical rotation and seeing 2 breast cancer patients that made an enormous impression on me. Almost as a woman, being able to place myself in their shoes, where at that point everybody standing around their bed was male, everybody treating them was male, and even as a student, having the ability to connect with them and to connect with their experience, and having this inkling that having a different connection with this patient throughout each treatment journey would make such a big difference. And I was just drawn to that. As I was specializing in surgery, I mean, it became clear as daylight that this is where I want to spend my energy. Also because it kind of lends itself to a little bit of a different type of surgical practice. Surgery can be very mechanical, you know. You take someone's appendix out and you never see them again, you know. It's like, take the gallbladder out, cheers, off you go. Hope you're better. You never see them again. But with these patients, you have at least a 5-year relationship. You see them continuously. You actually get to know them. So it is a completely different journey. You have the thrill and the joy of using your surgical skill to assist them. But you have this interaction that is perhaps more familiar to an oncologist or a GP or a psychiatrist.
Right.
Yeah.
It also means you're interacting with people at a time in their life when they're really terrified, when they're confronting deaths, perhaps for the first time, often at a young age with breast cancer. What's that been like for you? Because I know when I was an intern, I was offered an opportunity to do some research with cervical cancer patients. And at the time, as much as I wanted to take it on, I turned down the opportunity because I didn't think I could cope with the emotional stress of working with people who were dealing with those kinds of diagnoses. And then, of course, it came back again when I was working in my practice. I started working with dominantly women who had breast cancer. So that was quite a journey, and I learned a lot working with those people. But it also took a lot out of me when I was younger and not as self-aware and not in touch with the fact that I needed to take care of myself too.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing challenge and almost a healing journey for myself, I have to say. And this is where that saying, healer, heal thyself, kind of comes in, and I'm constantly revisiting why am I putting myself in this excruciating circumstances again and again and again. And when I started out, I had moments of horrible terror facing this disease, this monster that was destroying so many lives. Many moments of crying behind a closed bathroom door. Many moments of sitting in a corner and I cannot have this conversation one more time. And not being quite sure where to go with the energy. And I think I've mentioned this to you before, almost feeling like I'm carrying that energy with me. And that heaviness that permeates your own being. That has become easier with very deliberate work on my part. I think you can have one of two responses to it, or maybe three. I think the one is you can say, this is not for me, and you run away and you walk away. You simply say, I'm not dealing with this. The other one is, and unfortunately I see this with so many colleagues, is this is too painful. I'm going to continue, but I'm just going to shut down and I'm going to become a robot. And then there is a third way where you can say, I am learning and I am experiencing as much as this patient is, and this is going to be a journey for me as well. I need to empower myself, and I actually need to face what this is bringing up about life. This is existential questions that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, and it's terrifying. There's a song, and you know, this is just my own meaning. I don't think the song has got anything to do with it, but there's a song by AWOL Nation. The lyrics go something is, I'm going to make a deal with a big bad wolf so that the big bad wolf don't bite no more. When I first listened to that song, I was like, this is my song. Because this is it's almost like I saw cancer, this hard thing. Okay, if I'm going to stay and I'm going to look you in the eye, and I'm going to look you in the eye every day, and I'm not going to run, are you going to stop biting?
Wow.
It's still biting. But it's been a rich journey.
Yeah. I read a quote yesterday, I think, that said something about joy emerges out of embracing the suffering. And as much as I am reluctant to admit that that's true, in a way it is.
Doesn't make it easier.
No, it doesn't make it easier. Your email byline says surgery with soul. Tell me more about that.
When I had to open my private practice, I was quite fearful. And I always said that I will never be a private surgeon. I had very preconceived ideas about private medicine in our country, feeling very, very strongly about equitable healthcare and access to medicine, and that every single patient deserves the same level of care. private practice felt like a betrayal in a certain way to that ethos that I held very close to my heart. But because of circumstances, I had to do that. And I got really overwhelmed by suddenly realizing that private medicine is a business. Right. And I have no idea how to run this business. And there's a part of me that will always be in conflict with that sort of business part of it. Business and medicine, they're just bad bed partners and they don't even belong in the same sentence. Yet that is the reality. So for me to remind myself that there must be a way to do it a little bit differently. Like we could maybe shift the system, even if it was with a millimeter, with Project Flamingo within the state sector. Maybe this is another opportunity to shift the system, or at least the perception of the system can be quite harsh and money driven and business-like, into a better healing space, a softer space, a space with soul. I think that's what I try to remind myself every day. This is what we do. We're doing surgery. We're doing it in this practice. We're doing this in this environment. But we bring the heart in. We bring the soul in. It's welcome through the doors. Again, in a bi-directional way.
So in a way, I guess you're challenging some of the perceptions people may have about surgeons and what it is to be a surgeon. Historically or typically, the surgeon is kind of the top of the pile. And there was, in one of your interviews, you said that somebody once said to you, the surgeon is the captain of the ship. Nothing and nobody in the hospital has the say a surgeon does. And of course, there's also this fantasy about the person who often literally in that theatre is holding life and death in their hands. Here you are, surgeon, qualified, opening your own private practice. And then at different stages of the journey, there's been this constant, you don't belong here, you're not cut out for this, you shouldn't be doing this.
It's interesting how the outside world and the media, with medical shows being so popular now, has really fed into this narrative of the hero surgeon. And by word, if you see us all as human beings running around, it's so far from the truth. But I think it does draw a certain personality type that's very happy to actually feed into that story and very happy to act according to that story because of own trauma or wounds, as I've come to learn. It's a brilliant facade to uphold, and one that comes with quite a bit of prestige if you're into it.
Absolutely.
To see how people go from this sort of, I've arrived, and still quietly having all the meltdowns and the traumas, but so few people being willing to speak about it. I think in my case, it's been strange that I've been really drawn to it, because from my physical appearance to my personality, none of it actually fits the what you have in your head.
The stereotype.
The stereotype. I mean, I'm confused for a schoolgirl still very often. I was elated to have my 40th birthday because I was finally, like, people are going to see me as mature enough to do this job.
Sure.
My voice kind of sounds a little bit girlish, so I don't have the auditory presence that is associated with this job. I'm soft and I'm emotional and I'm all of those things. So it's been a constant paradox, and yet a thrill for me, actually quite entertaining to observe the reaction of others, my own reaction within the system and the environment. Yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you celebrate about making it to where you are today in the profession?
Mostly I'm just so grateful for the richness and the extremes of human experience that I've been witness to. There's a part of me that sort of felt old before my time. Like I was 25 going on 60. This job, the seeing life in all its messy glory is devastating and terrifying, but it's also wondrous. But I look back and I think, wow, how many people have the privilege to say, I've seen it and I stuck around to feel it too. I think that's what I'm most grateful for.
And what are some of the meltdowns, as you labeled them a moment ago, the meltdowns or the traumas that stand out for you about your journey?
There's a big overarching traumas of dealing with life and death that from a very young age you are acutely aware of your own mortality. And you're not necessarily equipped nor supported to deal with it, to ask the right questions about it, to seek the necessary advice or support or counseling for it. And I think that at times was quite damaging when I was left to my own devices to try and make sense of it, and not always in the most healthy way. And I think then there's the little traumas of functioning in a system that hopefully it's getting better, but can be quite dysfunctional in the way that it treats the very people that's supposed to take care of others. It's a system that's very bad at taking care of the caretakers. That leaves its mark. It really does. I think as I've gone along, and we've spoken about this as well, making peace with the fact that while this is a very rich journey and it's difficult for me to imagine doing anything else, it comes with a price tag. And for better or worse, I've made decisions that has cost me in terms of my personal life.
What has been the cost?
So I think relationally, I've definitely paid a huge price, and I'm not blaming my career for it solely. There's been many factors at play, but I was 25, going on 26 when I went through a divorce. And what I was experiencing as a young doctor at the time definitely had a huge impact on the failure of that marriage at a very young age. My inability to process certain traumas and deal with certain things, and having a very young partner that didn't know what to do with that or how to support me. That turned into quite a destructive situation. That was a huge cost very early on in my life. You don't walk around thinking I'm going to be a divorcee at 26. I think personal relationships has always been challenging because you may be willing to pay the price in terms of your time and your attention, because the reality is, and especially as a surgeon, you have got so little control of your time. A surgery does not end promptly at 5 o'clock when everybody else goes home. Sometimes it goes on until 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And you just get home and the phone rings again and there's been a complication and you need to get into your car and you need to get back there. What you don't realize is that while you may be willing to pay that price, you're going to ask every single person that you love to pay that price with you. And it's a tough ask. And you have to be very careful not to go into a, how can you not understand this? How can you not see that I cannot control this? You knew this about me when you chose to walk a certain path with me. And yet you have to have so much empathy for that person that's always on the receiving end of you taking care of other people. I think one of the most difficult things that has been said to me, probably one of the most hurtful things, and I'm still not quite sure where to go with it, I've had to acknowledge the truth of it, is somebody that I love telling me that you are the most selfish person that I know. And me going in my head, everything, every moment of every day is about everybody else.
Wow.
How can you say that? But from their perspective, they are at the mercy of everybody else's needs that I necessarily put first. From that perspective, it does come across as selfish. Those are the price tags. I don't have children. That was never a conscious decision, but always pushing and pushing harder within this career, it sort of just kind of was never the right time or never the right circumstance. And you wake up one day and you say, wow. And this is me. I mean, this is my unique experience.
Sure.
It's certainly not everybody's experience, but this is how my journey unfolded.
Do you regret it?
No, I don't regret it.
Would you do it again?
I would absolutely do it again. Maybe with a few adjustments here and there. Definitely. You know, I don't believe in that thing. People that say they've got no regrets, I'm always a bit suspicious about that because how the hell did you get through life with that? Good for you. But so are there regrets? Yes, there's definite regrets. Would I do certain things differently? Absolutely. Did I do them best in the moment with the information that I had? Yeah, I certainly did try.
And I know that you're quite outspoken about the importance of physician self-care and how important it is to look after yourself. Do you think that that's something that comes with ease to you?
No. Oh my word. You just like pressing on all those little tender points. All right. No, I think I've said this to you as well. Sometimes I feel like an absolute fraud because I am a loud advocate for physician self-care and mental health and wellness. Yet I often find myself in the position of near breakdown before I'm willing to reach out. Still not quite where I want to be in terms of applying my wisdom to myself. But that being said, I do think that I am quite aware of building more things into my day. Especially as I got older, I've turned into a sleep Nazi and, really looking at things like, am I sleeping well? Am I eating okay? Am I getting a reasonable amount of exercise besides walking up and down the hospital? It's not perfect and it will never be perfect, but it's better.
Yeah. What do you wish you had known when you started the journey?
Well, maybe the ignorance was bliss. It's a good thing that I didn't know.
Yeah. Do you think you would have started the journey if you'd known?
I don't think I would have been able to resist it, the curiosity. I still would have wanted to find out for myself. But I think probably knowing that, the voices may have had a point here and there, the outside voices, but it's not the entire truth. And you may go through moments where you want to give up, but it's worth continuing.
What are some of the things that have helped you to get through those difficult times?
It's definitely turning inward, getting quiet, making room for my own thoughts, which can be dangerous. So reaching out to a very select few people. I don't trust many people with that internal battle. But those that I do trust have always been very, very helpful. Reading, getting curious about why I'm feeling, how I'm feeling, have the collapse, let it pass, take a breath, ask the question. There's no real recipe to it. I think that's the pattern. Then get curious. Try to make some sense of it. Sometimes the sense I made of it was not the healthier sense, but definitely pulled me up by my bootstraps and made me take the next step. And every time it gets a little bit healthier and a little bit more insightful.
You're reminding me of, a couple of things actually. The one was a third-year medical student that I had the privilege to interact with for a time who came to see me one day because she had an experience in the hospital where on a ward round she encountered a patient who was the same age as her and had been violently assaulted by a partner, I think it was, with a golf club. With extensive brain injuries. And as she was standing at the bedside, she started feeling uncomfortable, kind of wanted to run away and couldn't contain her own emotions. And so she left the ward round and went and stood in the corridor, and she was trying to self-regulate and taking deep breaths and crying. And one of the more senior registrars went out, stood in front of her and said, "Pull yourself together, you'll never be a doctor if you behave like this. Take yourself down to student health and get some support." So she went down to student health and they wrote a prescription for an anxiolytic. And she had the presence of mind to go, surely there must be another way. And her question to me was, how do I learn to stay present in those situations and contain my own emotions, feel my emotions? I don't want to numb them. Surely there must be another way for me to do this than to numb myself. And I guess that's a conversation that certainly in my day of medical training was not discussed. I think there's more space for that now. But what people don't always realize is that this position that comes with all this power and privilege and status often has an enormous cost, which you've been touching on. And I don't know what the stats are in South Africa, but I think in the States it's something like 400 physicians commit suicide every year. And there's a book actually been written about physicians' experiences called Also Human. And it reminded me when you were talking now that you said the biggest gift someone can give their patient is to be whole rather than perfect.
Yes. As you were telling that story, I can recall so many times in my own life where that was my reality. And I think what you've been told is that your emotion is not appropriate. And in fact, the opposite is true. What you are feeling is an appropriate human response. What is not appropriate is somebody not being able to see that. And what a missed opportunity to actually have a conversation and say, this is hard. For both of us.
Exactly.
Wow. And I have to say that I think is an ongoing and silent struggle for so many doctors. Because you're indoctrinated into that what you're feeling is inappropriate, whereas it is the most appropriate, psychologically healthy response to have to certain situations.
Yeah. What advice would you have for a young person thinking of starting out in medicine and maybe more specifically in surgery today?
Be sure that it is you that want this thing. Because if it's not you, it's going to be a very, very tough journey. That internal desire and drive, that calling, it does count for a lot when the going gets tough. And don't wait for the bubble to hit the fan, because it's going to. I can guarantee you it's going to. From day one, build into your life ways, structures, support systems where you can get to know yourself better, have healthy sounding boards, process what's happening to you. Don't shove it in a dark corner, because it's going to catch up with you. And do it, because there's so much work to be done. There's so much change to be made. We need people with a heart and passion and a will and a desire to do this job.
Sounds like you.
Yes, we hope.
Anything else you'd like to add to the conversation before we close?
I just want to thank you for the beautiful presence that you are in my life, and often being that healthy sounding board for me that's never been scared to run away from the hard conversations or the tough emotions, and being a personification of that integrative, functional model of healing. Not just medicine, but healing.
Thank you, Liana. It's been a privilege to know you all these years.
Thanks, Maria.
Amy, is there anything you would like to ask before we close?
It's such a beautiful conversation. You have such a wonderful mind, but you also have such a wonderful heart. And I'm so grateful that there are so many women that are being blessed with your presence and that you're doing the work that you do. It's so wonderful.
That's so kind. Thank you.
It's what you're doing is so important and so vital, and I'm sorry that the journey has been so difficult, and I'm sorry that the journey has been so lonely, but the work that you're doing is so important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liana. It's been a privilege.
That was good.
It was good. I'm Dr. Maria Christodoulou, and you've been listening to the Awakening Doctor podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your friends, follow Awakening Doctor on Instagram, Facebook, and Spotify, and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe, rate, and give us a good review. Thank you so much for listening.